Hello everyone, this is Michael from KendoWorld and welcome to another KED Talk. Today we're going to be joined by Ivo van Roij from the Netherlands. Ivo is 30 years old now and began Kendo when he was 18 years old back in Holland. After graduating university where he studied design, he then went to the International Budo University in Chiba Prefecture, Japan, to do their one-year Budo Specialisation course in Kendo. After that, he spent some time in America training over there, come back to Japan to work now in the computer game industry. And at the moment, he's just gone back to the Netherlands for a break at Christmas where we're talking to him now. So Ivo, welcome to KED Talk.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. I was trying to think earlier on today, when was the last time we actually met? It's been several years since we've bumped into each other. I think that the last time we physically met was probably at the first KendoWorld. What was it? The kind of seminar thing inside of the Budokan with Inoue Sensei. Right, that was back in then 2012.
Yeah, 7-8 years ago. Yeah. A
bit more than that. And actually you and some of the other students from the university helped us on the day, guiding guests. And who was that? There was you and was it Fanny and Joseph? And
no, yeah, maybe. They were not in my year, but we were in the year Esteban Hernandez from Colombia and Jokine from Finland. So that was a very interesting event. That was my first, I think, proper meeting with a whole lot of Hachidan in a very small room.
Yeah, that was a great event. For those of you that are not familiar with it, we started doing, us at KendoWorld started doing a yearly Keikokai, Kendo meeting, and we invited lots of Hachidan. I think at that one we had 8 or 9 Hachidans and the well-known Inoue Yoshihiko Sensei, who sadly passed away a few years ago, who wrote the Kendo Kata book. He took training. It was fantastic. And Ivo and some of the other graduates or students at the time from the Budo University were actually helping us out and guiding people and making sure people got from one place to another at the event. So it was great. I can't believe that was the last time we met then.
I think so. Yeah. I don't recall, because I've been traveling around a lot. And after I graduated from Budai, I basically went back to the Netherlands. So I didn't really spend a whole lot of time in Japan. I mean, obviously I saw Alex a few more times because I visited him in Osaka. But yeah, it's been 7 or 8 years or longer, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go back to the beginning then. So as I mentioned in your introduction, you started Kendo when you were 18 years old, and that's in Tilburg. Was that right, in the Netherlands?
Yeah. I wouldn't say small. I mean, compared to Tokyo, it's small, but it's a city in the south of the Netherlands. And yeah, basically one of my friends said, "Oh, you like Japanese stuff. Why don't you do Kendo?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know what Kendo is." And he's like, "Well, I do Kendo. Why don't you join me?" And that was my very first time I kind of got in touch with Kendo. At that time, I think we were 3, maybe 4 people in the dojo. Everybody was beginners. Most of them didn't have bogu. The teacher was a Nidan guy who was also, just a regular person. So it was a very small club. So that's where I started.
And that was your main club for a few years then, while you were in the Netherlands, or did you join out into other clubs after that?
Well, I really didn't know anything about the whole Kendo scene at all. So for me, at least the first year, I think, all that I knew that was Kendo was that little club. I didn't know there was a national federation or, these things weren't told to us. It was just oh, here you have a shinai and just swing it around. So then eventually I registered for the National Federation, and there were these central practices that were held. And that's where I went. And I was so surprised to see that there were, instead of like just 3 or 4 people in the whole club, that we were there. I think back then it wasn't even that big. I think maybe we had 40 people or 50 people at a central practice. And that was one of the bigger ones at the time. So yeah, that was like a whole new world. And I saw so many different perspectives. So yeah, that was a pretty cool experience.
But joining that first club, then you said it was very small. It was kind of love at first sight with kendo. Then you realized you were into it straight away.
Yeah. I had the first practice, and it was mostly just suburi, and then there was 1 or 2 people who had bogu, so we were allowed to do men hits on them. And I was like, wow, this is so cool, So like pretty much, I guess every beginner, I came back home and I went online. I was like, oh, what is kendo? And oh, look at all these beautiful bogu that you can buy online. And I was just super excited the whole time, and just waiting every week, like, oh, when is it Thursday again? When can I go back for this 1 hour of practice and feel really, like excited, wearing hakama and gi eventually. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
Just what you going back a little bit further than that, something you mentioned just before, your friend that took you to the dojo said that you were interested in Japanese culture or Japanese things, and that's why he thought you should go. What was your kind of interest in Japan at that time?
It was a lot, actually. So one of my high school friends, that I think I met him when I was like a year 14, 15 years old. His dad is an English teacher, and he teaches at the same school where they also have Japanese classes. And he would join those Japanese groups going overseas back to Japan. And he would always bring extra stuff back for his son. It was, but at the time was like the only friend I had. And he would bring all these random kinds of Japanese stuff back, like Beyblades and anime or manga, like really like a lot of different things or gacha things. So I kind of got introduced by my friend into Japanese culture in that kind of sense. And then in Tilburg, we also have a group called Minami Yashigara, which is, I think, kind of like a Japan focus group in our city. And yeah, we kind of got introduced to Japanese food there as well. So for me, it was like the whole package. And then, of course, anime was such a big thing that, it's a big influence. I really like watching it. And yeah.
What are your favorite anime to watch then and now, or are they still the same?
Oh, back then, like I think one of the very first, I remember very vividly, the very first anime I watched was like when I was a younger kid. It was Gundam Wing, which for some reason came on TV, and I didn't really understand it, but it looked very cool because they had giant robots and everything was super cool. And then obviously Crayon Shin-chan. Like that's I don't know why, but in the Netherlands we had a Dutch dubbed version of it, so I could understand what they were saying, and I was surprised that they were allowed to actually air it. But yeah, those were pretty cool. And then when I got more into the anime like side, where you go online and you watch the animes that you like, I think Full Metal Alchemist, that was like one of the bigger ones that I watched. That was like, wow, this is really impressive. And from there on, you just roll into like the typical ones. I watched a little bit of Naruto. I watched a little bit of Bleach, like the typical ones. And yeah, lately I think I really like the art style from Makoto Shinkai. So, the movies like Your Name or Garden of Words, or it's more like movies, but or 5 centimeters a second or something like that. Yeah, those are pretty good, but that's mostly the art style.
Oh wow! So you had a great interest in Japan then, even before you set foot inside a dojo. So that was the first time. Then was when you were 18. So I'm assuming that you continued doing kendo throughout university. Did they have a club there, or was it in a local town type club?
Well, it's not really university. It's more like a college kind of thing. So it's like a grade below, I guess, or at least in Dutch standards. But that was actually in my hometown. So I was able to keep practicing and continue practicing there. And then at one of the central practices, Ivo van Roij, the current captain of the Dutch national team. I talked to him a little bit, and he was like, well, if you really like kendo, then why are you not going to Japan? It's like the place to be. I was like, oh, I didn't know that was an option. He's like, yeah, you can go to the International Budo University. I can help you out with some documents, and the federation has already done it for other people as well. So they can help you out as well. I was like, oh, okay, that's really cool. And after I graduated from my college, then I kind of applied for that one. And yeah.
So how old was that when you finished college? 20, 21?
I was 20. Yeah, I was 20. And then I went to Japan because the Japanese year and the Dutch year are different, right? So the Japanese year starts in April, and I think the Dutch year starts in September. So I graduated in July, and then I had to wait all the time until it was March, and then I could actually go. So I arrived there when I was 20, and then my birthday is in April. So basically the first month I was there, I already had my birthday party. I turned 21, and then basically the entire year, my 21st year was at Budai. Yeah, very lots of new experiences.
So I think we should probably just briefly explain what Budai is to the people that are listening that don't know. So in a really small town on the coast of Chiba in Japan, a town called Katsura, you've got the Nippon Budokan Kenshu Center, which is a huge training center, and you can stay overnight there. That's run by the Nippon Budokan. And they have every year, or not recently, obviously, but the International Seminar of Budo Culture, which is a 3-day or 3-night, 4-day Budo extravaganza, which just is really just a booze up for 4 days. But also in that town as well, you've got the International Budo University, which obviously does Budo like judo and karate and naginata, all these sorts. But it's also quite well known for its baseball team, and I think American football it has there as well. So it's not only Budo. But at this university, they have a 1-year Budo Specialisation course where students from overseas can go over there and train in kendo, judo, karate, naginata, sumo, all the main Japanese Budo. And they stay there for a year. And we've had from the KendoWorld team, Alex never did it, but I think Hamish and Greg and Tyler, there might be a couple of others, have all gone there for a year to study in kendo, and have all ended up staying in Japan for the rest of their life up until now there. So yeah, that's Budai as its short name is what it's known. So Ivo, you went there, as you just said, when you were 20 and very soon turned 21 at Budai. So how was that change then from going, I guess you said, kind of a fairly small town in Holland to an even smaller town in Japan? But how was that change for you?
Well, I mean, in terms of people that live there, it was a complete change, because my city in the Netherlands is, I think, 200,000 people living there. So it's not a huge city, but it's decent enough. And then you go to Budai, and I don't know, it's like maybe 20,000 people live there altogether, including the 2,000 students that they have at Budai. And most of the
people that live there are probably over 60 as well, I would guess.
Yeah. It's like a huge category, right? You have all these oba-chan or ji-chan, like the old grandpa and grandmas just walking around on the streets, watering the flowers and that kind of stuff. And then you have like these bunch of students just driving around on the scooters the whole time. So that's like the typical view that you have there. And, I mean, it's a beautiful place. It's it's like located on a hill, or as we would say in the Netherlands, it's a mountain. But yeah, it's amazing there. You can see the ocean, you can see the forests. It was definitely an experience. That's true.
It's actually Katsura where it is. It's one of the premium surf spots in Japan as well. So it's people from the university tearing around on motorbikes people in their 60s and above in little mini cars, and loads of surfers hanging around there as well. It's a unique place in Japan, I think.
Yeah, it definitely is unique. And it was my very first experience with Japan, because obviously I'd never been outside of Europe in the first place. So that was so unique for me. I was like, wow, this place is amazing. And I didn't speak a word Japanese. Oh, maybe I could say konnichiwa or something, but like I couldn't speak a word Japanese. And then you have all these Japanese students, and you have the Japanese teachers and everybody in the city. Nobody wanted to speak English, or at least nobody did. So I was like, I don't know what to say. It was just a very unique experience. That's for sure.
So actually on that program that you were on, you would have weekly Japanese lessons, or was it more than once a week?
It's more than once a week, but obviously when you go there for the Budo Specialization course, right, the main thing is the Budo you do. And back when I went there, the only two Budo you could pick were Kendo and Judo, right? So you had people that do Kendo come there for a specialization year. Same for Judo. I think these days you can, for like 5 or 6 different Budo, you can come there. You could also come there for kyudo, or just for aikido, or those kind of things. But yeah, the main focus is, of course, the Budo part. And I think we had 2 or 3 hours a week on different days where we would learn Japanese in all different types of ways, right? We had like kind of like a culture class where we do like shodo or ikebana, like the flower arrangement or the calligraphy or the tea ceremony kind of thing. Then we had like some actual proper Japanese classes, where you get homework and you have to learn all the hiragana and katakana and just try to build up from there. We also had like a more, like kindergarten culture class where we would, sing children's songs or learn how to fold the kabuto from the newspaper, or, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you get introduced into all these different aspects of the Japanese culture. It's not just only kendo and only studying from books, which was really attractive for me, right? Like I really found that a useful way to learn, because I'm terrible at learning from books. I just have to do. So yeah.
Well, that must have been great for you, obviously already having a real big interest in Japanese culture, or the anime side of the culture, and then to be exposed to all these other types as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So what grade in Kendo were you when you headed to Budai?
Well, I mean, obviously, because I just started, I didn't have a grade at all.
Oh, really?
I think we did some internal Q gradings, like 6th Q, 5th Q, 4th Q. I don't remember. And then right before I went, the president of the Dutch Kendo Federation actually said like, yeah, I know we agreed that you could go there, but you don't have a done grade yet. So maybe we should like see if we can like sneak you in some Kendo grading somewhere else in Europe. So we can just, like at least get you there with your shodan. So I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks before I went to Japan, they kind of said like, oh, there's one in Belgium where you can take shodan. So I went there and I passed, and I arrived in Japan as a fresh shodan, super proud that I finally had like a done grade. Mm-hmm. And then you get completely kicked your ass there by all these other students who've been doing Kendo for like almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So So a fresh shodan. Yeah.
So how did you find the change then from your first training at Budai then?
It was gruesome. Yeah, it's all these people were so excited, and the whole focus of the practice was different as well. The clubs that I was practicing at, we were mostly focusing on kihon, like basics, doing a lot of suburi and just exercises where you practice a strike and you have a motodachi. And then when I came to Japan, there was no such thing. It was like we have our warming up, and then after it's jigeko for 2 hours. Right. So that was my first experience. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah.
You really enjoyed it, or was it kind of intimidating at first when you first had to do jigeko with all these kendo uni kids?
Well, I mean, obviously, it wasn't my first time doing jigeko, because we had those central practices in the Netherlands as well. And I realized, going there as a fresh shodan, even though I was like, oh, I'm a shodan, I realized that I would get beaten up there. So, just having fun with the students, especially with the third and fourth years, it was just super cool. There was like a really nice vibe. So I don't think I was very intimidated. I noticed that my body was lacking a lot. I didn't have the stamina to, like really go all out for the full 2 hours, like these students would. My feet were like in no time, like messed up, I had blisters everywhere. Yeah. My arms hurt and I had like blue spot, like bruises everywhere. But yeah, it was definitely a very good experience. And especially because the students, they are so fast, and every student has has their own personality. I remember a guy that would do like, oh yeah, let's do Juppon Shobu. So like 10-point match. And then he would score those 10 points in like 30 seconds and he'd be like, ha, I got you. And then he would just walk off. And I'd be like, what happened here? And then you had other students, that were like a little bit more serious, and they were like, okay, let's like try to have this communication in the shiai or in the jigeko. And they would like really try to push and see if they could like get something from me, and they would try to give something back. So it was like an amazing opportunity because they were all students, but even within the students, there were like so much like different types to practice with. It was amazing.
So what would have been a typical practice then for you at Budai? Is it is it like asageko in the morning, or is it lunchtime, or in the evening?
Yeah, it was a lot actually. That was like the thing when I very first came there, like the official classes hadn't started and everything yet. So when we heard that there was like asageko, and one of the fellow bekase, the people who do the 1-year course, already went to one of those morning practice and he didn't tell us, we felt jealous because we were feeling like we were missing out. Yeah, that definitely changed over the year. So our regular sessions were when everything was like 100% into it. I think we started every day except for Sunday. We would start with asageko, 1 hour from 7 till 8. Then I would go back, eat something, get changed, and then we had 4 periods during the class during the day, and those could be anything. They could be shiai class where you would learn how to do shimpan. We would have kata classes where we do like the bokuto ni yoru kendo kihon waza keiko, with the kihon kata. We would do real like the kendo kata, but with habiki, so with like a metal sword, so you get like a real feel of like the tsukamaki or that kind of stuff. And after those periods, we would have bukatsu, which is basically club practice. And that was the main practice of the day, and those were usually, I would say, 2.5 hours. We would start at 4:30 and we would end somewhere between 6 and 7, sometimes going as late as 8, depending on if there was like a tournament or something going on. And I was doing different Budo as well, because I got introduced to multiple stuff there because it's the Budo University. So I initially went there doing kendo only. But I was introduced to kyudo and to iaido. So I tried to incorporate those as well. And our iaido practices were, I think, 2 or 3 times a week from 8 o'clock in the evening until 10 o'clock in the evening. Wow. So I would also go there. And then I would go to bed because next morning at 7, I have to be in the dojo for asageko again. So
asageko, it was compulsory to attend at that point, or?
No, it was free. People could join. I think for the serious students, right? Like as a Beka, as a, like the specialization course foreigners, so to speak, people want you to, or the sensei wants you to be there, but there's no real consequences if you come or not. I know a lot of stories of students who don't even go to like the regular practices. They just see like, oh, Buddha is a nice year off where I can party in Japan. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think for the regular students, the asageko is compulsory. Most of them have to be there. The sensei are pretty strict. Like, okay, you have to be there and do like the full hour of practice. Yeah.
So what would the asageko then, what would it usually consist of? Was it just, as you said, just a few kirikaishi and then jigeko for the rest of the hour?
I think when I was there, because I've noticed that it changes every year. I go back every 2 years to the university to like correct my own kendo back onto the path that, you know, they do at Budai. And it's been changing a lot. But when I was there, we would start off at 6:30. We'd start off outside. They have a track and field. We would just run for 20 minutes. Then we would change, and then we go into the dojo. We would all do like our warming up together with stretching, that kind of stuff. And then you would find a partner, and most of the exercises were uchikomi geiko based. So the full length of the hall, you would do like man, or kirikaishi, or you know, like where you do the you go for man, and then you do tayatari, you push, and you go for man again, and you push, and you go again. Just these kind of exercises. And then I think the last
hall as well, isn't it? It's
3.5 iaido long. So it's very long. I was destroyed, especially the first half year there. That like was just me like slowly building up my stamina. I think the second half of the year there, I felt more comfortable doing everything. But yeah, definitely it's a long haul. It's tough practice. But then again, you're there with a lot of students, right? I think at my time we had 300. Yeah, I would say about 300 kendoka there. And then for asageko, you know, although it was mostly compulsory for the students who really want to get higher, you know, the ones who want to be in the Budai team. So I think we would have at asageko maybe 60 or 70 people who were there always every morning, and then maybe another 20 or 30 that, you know, like would come occasionally. So you would go in rows, right? You would have like the whole length of the hall, and then the next couple would go, and then the next couple would go. So you would have a short break of like half a minute before you had to go again. But it was.
Was that short break enough time to recover?
For me, it wasn't. For the students, it was. Yeah. Right. Especially in the beginning. I think at the end, it was fine. I could do it, but that's because, you know, you're doing it every day and you're getting into the same vibe.
That must have been such a good experience for you, kind of still really early on in your kendo career, I suppose, doing that amount of hard yards right at the beginning is like giving you a really good foundation from which to, you know, to build onto.
Yeah. I mean, obviously like when I talk about it like this, I really do feel that is in a sense is true. But I very vividly remember that when I was there, I felt it was the opposite. I felt like, oh, you know, like we are already going into, you know, this jigeko period so fast, right? There's not a whole lot of kihon practice, and they basically expect you to already know how your body has to move. So when I was there, I really I remember thinking like, oh, you know, all these students, they had like 4 years or 5 years at, you know, like elementary level, and then at like high school level, another 4 or 5 years, where they got really instructed on how to properly use your body and your hands for like the right tenouchi or the, you know, fumikomi, ashisabaki kind of stuff. And I just came there as a fresh showdown, you know, so I knew I had to have my right foot in front and my right hand in front. But, you know, like how to move your body properly and how to use like really good tenouchi, it felt to me that was a little bit like going over my head too fast. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely a good experience. Yeah.
How did you cope then? You said earlier on that you could basically only say konnichiwa and stuff like that in Japanese. So how did you cope during the actual training sessions with the lack of Japanese ability? Was it just simply watching what the sensei was doing, or watching the other people around you?
Yeah. But I mean, especially during the first few practices, that was the case. I was also very lucky that in my year, we had a girl called Marina Kodato. She's from Brazil, and she spoke Japanese, right? So she did a little bit of translations where, you know, like we were really in a pinch. And one of the big advantages of Budai is that, I told a little bit about those 4 classes that you have every day, which are different types of classes. You have the Japanese ones and all that stuff. We also have like an hour and a half allocated. At that time, for me, it was on a Friday evening before Bukatsu, with a Hachidan Sensei. So you just sit down with the other Bekase. I think we were 15 people back then. And we would just discuss stuff with this Hachidan Sensei. We could ask questions. The Sensei would prepare stuff that he wanted us to know about. So obviously, like in the first few classes, we discussed like, how does practice at Budai work? What do you have to do? And he just basically said, just go up until other students and be like, onagai shimasu, and then just follow them until they, do jigeko with you. And then go to the next one after they finish and do the same thing. So that's like the first introduction that we got into like Bukatsu and doing Budai Kendo. Yeah.
Okay. Who was that sensei that was talking to you there? Is it Ijima Sensei?
Ijima Sensei, yeah. Ijima Akira Sensei.
Yeah, I think for those of you that are familiar with the International Seminar of Budo Culture, he's one of the main Kendo instructors, and there it's very, very difficult to fight against. He's a huge guy and very strong, and I think he got Hachidan. He must have been really young when he got it. I think that most of the people who went to the most teachers at Budai, because you also have like Iwakiri Sensei, Maruhashi Sensei, I think all of them passed their Hachidan before they were 50. And I think Ijima Sensei and Iwakiri Sensei both passed it when they were 46, I think. I think Iwakiri Sensei was a little bit older, I think. When I first started going to that Budo seminar, there was Makita Sensei and Ijima Sensei were already Hachidan, and then Iwakiri Sensei and Maruhashi Sensei were Nanadan, and then they both got it. They got it a while ago now, but imagine that at one point in that university, 4 Hachidan Kendo Senseis. It was fantastic. But that's really good that that one of them would sit down with you and you'd be able to just have an hour and a half just picking their brains about different things. You wouldn't normally get that in any other type of situation, I don't think.
No, exactly. And what I found really interesting and liberating is that we were talking about like literally anything that was remotely connected to Kendo. We talked about very basic stuff. I remember that he told like one of the students, like, run to your room and get your hakama so I can show you guys how to fold it and how to wear it. I mean, that's a interesting experience to get that from a Hachidan, because it's, it seems like such a basic thing. But then, like he would also bring videos from the All Japan champions, and we would like sit down to analyze those. But we would also go over like old school movies, like the jidaigeki kind of stuff where they have like these dramas that play like samurai, and he would be like explaining on how these people run and what the history is based on how they move their ashisabaki in the movie. Or he would just sit down and tell us about how he went golfing last week and how it's always good to have something apart from Kendo, that it's not always only one focus. And that, that helped him a lot passing his Hachidan. Like these, they're connected, but they're so random that you don't really expect them to, be part of Kendo Talks with a Hachidan Sensei at a Kendo University. So yeah, that was very good. Yeah.
Okay, so the big practice that was maybe 2.5 hours in the evening, you mentioned the earlier one, the asageko was kind of a bit of running and stuff, and then all the length of the dojo doing different things. What was the evening practice made up of? Much to the same,
so
longer?
Yeah, we would start at 4:30. We would start with a warming up. I think we would do 10 minutes of warming up. And then everybody would sit in like seiritsu, seiza, everybody would sit down. And then if everybody sat down, one of the students, usually a first year, he would run downstairs to go grab the Hachidan Sensei. They would all, like come up, walk in, sit down. Then we do like mokuso, we do like the proper rei. And then all the students put on their men super fastly, and then the teachers would go to the side. Then all the students would do like jigeko. And then the teachers would like stand on the side and look like, okay, what are these people doing? So they could give proper feedback of students fighting students. And then after like 15, 20 minutes, so that's like a half an hour into the practice, around 5 o'clock, the teachers, they would put on their bogu as well. And then it was like at least an hour of jigeko. And then I think the last half hour of the practice would be something similar to like asageko, right? So eventually the teachers would take off their men. They would sit on the side. They would look a little bit at students. Then when it's time, they would like hit the taiko. So all the students would stop. They would all gather on one side of the dojo. And then the teacher would say like, okay, now we're going to do this type of uchikomi geiko. And they would like go all the way through the length of the hall. And then, especially Iwakiri Sensei is like very, powerful to the students. He would like walk with a huge ass boken, and he would like, well, I wouldn't say beat them up, but he would like force them to move faster in uchikomi geiko and like really, push these students to the limits. And then after that, it was again the taiko. Everybody would line up in seirits. Everybody would sit down, take off their men. And then the 2.5 hours practice were over. So everybody would line up for the sensei that they had the chance to practice with, get some feedback, and then just go home. Or in my case, I would get changed for iaido and go back to the dojo. But yeah, that was like the general practice every single day for 5 or 6 times a week.
Wow. So was there much chance to practice with the Hachidan senseis? Did you get to at least once a week or once a day? Or because I imagine that there's like 250, 300 other kids in the Kendo club as well, isn't there? So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it wasn't easy. And, in the beginning, the bekase, the foreigners, so to speak, didn't really have a clear idea how stuff was going on. But apparently the students would, before the practice, already decide on the lineup, right? So they would beforehand say, okay, today, this person, this person, this person, this person, etc. You guys are going to have practice with this sensei in this order, right? So everybody knew kind of what their number was at what day. And then, the bekase, the students, we didn't know stuff. So we would just line up, and then we would stand there ready and be like, oh, there's only one person or 2 people in front of me. And then the student would come and be like, oh, sumimasen. And then he would just go in front of you and you'd be like, what the hell? And then you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm just waiting for this guy then. And then the same thing would happen and the same thing would happen. And then usually the sensei would be like, knowing, like, oh, yeah, these are foreigners. They don't know how the number system works. Mm-hmm. So he would go to the next student in line and he would say like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to do keiko with this person right now or with this person right now. So I think on average, and I always lined up for the sensei, even though, like the students sometimes were like, oh my God, this guy is always cutting in line because we already made this like position order in advance. I think I got to practice with the sensei 3 times a week. Different sensei, of course. Makita sensei is extremely difficult to get practice with. First of all, because he only goes to practice once a week. He just has too much stuff to do with other dojo and that kind of stuff. So I think I could maybe the opportunity to practice him with once every 2 months because it's just so filled up. And then Ijima sensei and Iwakire sensei. Ijima sensei was obviously the first Hachidan, so he was like higher in the dojo. So most people would line up for him and he would try to make time. So I think I could practice with him once a week. And then Iwakiri sensei would be twice a week. So that's like my about 3 times a week that I could practice with them. And those are only sessions of like 2 minutes each. Mm-hmm.
But what a change though. Like you said, you're starting from a small club where you were in Tilburg, and the main guy, the lead teacher at the dojo was a Nidan, and then I'm sure, trying to do their best to give you a good start, but then going straight into that environment after not very long. So you'd only been in Kendo for like 2 years, it must have been then, before you went to there.
Yeah, I was a complete beginner. Yeah.
Wow, what a place to be a beginner though, at the practicing so much. I'm quite jealous, to be honest.
I was very lucky. The only downside is, like, so they saw where I was coming from, especially Ijima Sensei and the Iaido Sensei, Kanada Sensei. They really saw that I was struggling because of my, like, prior kendo education, so to speak. So we talked about it in private a lot as well, just the two of us or the three of us. And they kind of emphasized that when I would go back, I would have to start my own dojo. Because even though I was a shodan, like, I've been taught by them for a full year. And I felt, and I think that's kind of the reason why that they kind of understood that I saw what they were trying to teach. I'm not good at it. I'm not a high dan level, so I can't do the same stuff as them. But at least I got the focus point of the university correctly. So they really helped me with setting up my first dojo. Right? They would sit together with me, and they decided on, like, the name for the club. They decided on what the types of practice should be. I think for the first entire year that I was in the Netherlands, I had like a written schedule with them, like basically from minute to minute, saying, okay, warming up is like this, then Kihon is like this, then Jigeko is like this, for every single practice for 52 weeks. So that really helped me a lot. But then again, I was in the Netherlands. I was, after graduating from a university where I was practicing with 200 people every day, I went back to the south of the Netherlands, to my hometown. I started my own dojo, and we had 4 or 5 members. And I was teaching, right? So my own kendo at that time really halted, which was kind of a shame. So I think if I would have, like, continued to practice like I did at the university with the same intensity, I would definitely have been better, and have probably understood kendo a little bit better than I do now. But yeah.
Did they give you an opportunity to go for your Nidan grading while you were there at Budai, or didn't?
Yeah. Ijima Sensei told me, he said, "Oh, I really want you to do your Nidan examination." So I was very happy about that, and I was like, yeah, but I don't understand how to do that in Japan, right? I don't understand any of the Japanese federations, or how to even register in Japanese for one of those. And he's like, "Oh, no, don't worry about it. I'll arrange everything for you." I was like, "Okay, then just please let me know the date." And he's like, "Okay, I'll look it up. Can you let me know when you passed your shodan?" I was like, "Well, it was like a few weeks before I came to Japan." And he's like, "Okay, then I'll look for an examination in Japan during that time. Like, that's right after the 1 year mark that you're allowed to go." Mm-hmm. And then he's like, "Oh, it's on this specific date in March." And I was like, "Oh, that's super cool. I'll go there." We had like some kendo sessions, like one-on-one, where we were talking about, okay, what do I need to do for my Nidan examination? He showed the questions that were asked for the theoretical exams and how I would have to answer them. And then eventually he came to me and he said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, but your kendo examination is on the same day as the graduation ceremony from university, so I can't allow you to go." I was like, damn it. So I came back to the Netherlands in, I think, the end of April or maybe the beginning of May. And I did my kendo examination there in the Netherlands, and luckily I passed. But yeah, I didn't have the opportunity to do it in Japan, sadly.
So what were the real big things that you learned then from your time at Budai? So obviously it's a very intensive 1 year with, as you've already described, like tons of practices every day, and not only kendo, but let's just focus on kendo. What I'd like to say, maybe 1 or 2 of the big lessons that you learned while you were there, things that really helped you and continue to help you to this day?
I think one of the very practical things is, because the hall at Budai, it's unlike most halls in Europe, I think. It was very slippery, right? It's a very smooth wooden floor. It's very difficult to, move, because you just feel like you keep sliding and sliding. And I remember Iwakiri Sensei just coming up to me, and he put like his shinai like on my left foot. And he's like, "Okay, now try to do a men from that position where I don't move the left leg before." Like a lot of people have like this tendency to do this small step of left and then try to do the tobikomi. And he's like, just put his shinai like straight on my foot. I mean, it kind of hurt, but I remember it very vividly. And then he looked at my foot and he said like, oh, okay, you're gripping the floor with your toes too much, which means that when you try to push off, you use your toes for grip. And the toes are like a very, small surface. So it's easy to slide around. He said like, try to lift your toes up. The floor is like, try to lift your toes and then try with those lift toes on your left foot, try to push off. And that really helped me for like a very slippery floor to actually be able to push with my weight and push with my leg. So that's a practical thing. And yeah, I guess I just I learned a little bit of how the Japanese and dojo dynamics go. Because I was only used to this small dojo with 3 people. I didn't really know much about etiquette, which was very obvious when I first came there. I didn't know how to do proper day. I didn't know how to properly sit down. And I think that got me into trouble a few times, with the other students, because they kind of expect you when you go there that you know these things. So these are things that I learned, I guess. Yeah.
All right. So as you mentioned a little bit before, that they really wanted you to start your own kendo club when you moved back to Holland, and they wrote out essentially a whole year's syllabus for your club. So how did you find that then, becoming the teacher at a dojo?
Well, I was a little bit, like scary, but part of the preparation for me making my own dojo was going with Ijima Sensei to the Kenshu Center or to high school, and just have me as a motodachi or as a teacher for the Japanese kids, because I guess he figured that people in the Netherlands from my city would be the same level as elementary kids. You could say do a men and they would be able to do it, but there's still enough to improve on. So I kind of like gotten into this role of already slowly starting to teach. Not really, of course, because he was doing the teaching and it's just mostly me seeing it. But I think that helped a lot. And yeah, when I came back, it felt very natural. I had some friends who were friends before they started kendo, and they kept doing kendo and they came to my club. So there was like this very friendly vibe going on. It's just my friends and me doing something together, and I'm the one telling them how they should do it, because at that time I had the most knowledge about it. So yeah, that felt pretty natural.
So how many people did you start with in the dojo?
I think officially we started with 4 people, me, 2 kendo people, and 1 kyudo person. Because I immediately wanted to try different stuff, but that didn't really work out. So when I came to the Netherlands, it was mostly the kendo people. So I think 3 or 4 kendo people. And then slowly that increased. The first college that I did before I went to Budai was a design college, as you said. So I did a lot of graphic design and those kind of things. So I kind of knew how to make posters and flyers and that kind of stuff. And I really pushed on the promotional side. And I really tried to get as much knowledge of kendo in Tilburg out there. And that seemed to kind of work, because I think as of today, right now, I think we have 45 members in the club, consisting of kendo, kyudo, and iaido. So it grew.
in terms of dojos in the Netherlands, then is that quite a big one with 40 members, or?
It depends. I think most of the dojo have about, when you go there and physically practice with them, I think most of the clubs are around 10 people, 15 people. You have the clubs that are slightly bigger. The one where Donatella Castelli Sensei is practicing, or the Rotterdam club where most of the national team members are practicing. Those are obviously a little bit bigger. And then, like I said, our dojo has 40, 45 members, but they're spread out, right? Some do kyudo, some do iaido. And I think that currently when we practice, we have somewhere between 12 and 15 people at a kendo practice. So we're not the biggest, definitely not, but we're also not the smallest anymore, which is satisfying. Yeah.
So obviously, like Ijima Sensei and the others at Budai kind of helped you, give you ideas about what you should be doing with the dojo. If anyone else is thinking of starting to run their own dojo or found their own dojo, what's some good advice could you give them for some mistakes maybe that you made that people should avoid, or good things that you did?
Mm-hmm. I think originally when I came back from Japan, I wanted it to be a one-on-one copy of what I was doing at the university. And I think that was kind of a mistake because, some things just don't work as they do in Japan, as they work or as they work in Europe. At the university, Kohai Senpai was a big part. It's just so ingrained in Japanese culture. And I found it a very important part. So I tried to incorporate that as well. But maybe I stepped a little bit too hard on the, this is how, it is at Washinkan. That's the name of my club. But yeah, I those are the things that I think are both important, but also it's basically the same thing, right? I think it's important to get as close as possible to the ground truth, so to speak. But also be careful that you don't push it too much, because it's a different culture. So cultural aspects are something that you have to be slightly aware of.
Yeah, and I guess also at Budai, the kids there have probably been doing kendo for 14, 15 years by the time they make it to the university, and they obviously have a deep understanding probably already of the ins and outs of kendo and what you're supposed to do in the dojo and things like that. But people that are starting kendo when they're young adults or in their middle age have not got that background to it. So
yeah. I mean, like one of the the examples that I think is very familiar in other clubs as well. Like when you say in Japan to somebody, okay, grab your shinai, right hand forward, right foot forward, left hand backwards, left foot backwards. In Japan, they will do it. There's no reply. They will just, or maybe hi or something. That's it. And then I remember in the Netherlands, often enough, they say oh yeah, but I'm left-handed, so I'll do it the other way around. Okay. And I'm like, no, because this is, and it's just, it's like a cultural thing. It's just, I guess, a little bit different. And that's things that you have to work with, every culture has its difference. And I think in the Netherlands, it's easy to speak out, you're more on the same level. It's less hierarchical. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's easier for a student to say something to their teacher in a more similar way. Well, if you would do that in Japan, it would be very much frowned upon because they're we're a different level.
Right. So that was a kind of one type of difficulty then, just, okay. So actually you had spoken a little bit before about how you went to design college and you used that to help promote your club, Washinkan, was that right? Washinkan? Yeah, I remember seeing all of the promotional materials that you were putting on Facebook, and your logo looked fantastic, and there was always stuff going up on Facebook, and that. How important was that part of the social media aspect of your club? How important was that to its success?
I think that it's a combination of all the different things, right? I decided to really put my money on everything, right? Bet on multiple horses, so to speak. So obviously, I did Facebook, we did Instagram. We had both, just me posting stuff, as well as paid advertisements. Then we did just actually printing flyers and having myself or students just walk around in the city and just putting it in the mailboxes of people and just hoping that they would, come to our website. So then I also wanted to make sure that the website looked really, really properly. I think I did a lot of searching on the SEO checks to make sure that, the website would pop up as the first one when you type in something like Kendo Tilburg or just Washinkan or whatever. So that worked a little bit. And then other things that I also did was, together with my students, I had a contact within our local city office kind of thing. And we got the opportunity to do some sort of program where we would basically go to elementary schools and we would take over the PE classes for 3 weeks. And instead of them having regular, like gym classes where they're like running around or playing soccer or whatever, we would teach them kendo. We would like go over like, okay, today we're going to do, this week we're going to practice men. And we would like give them all shinai. We would like play games with them where they have to do like certain games like hitting balloons or whatever, or trying to hit tennis balls or these kind of stuff. And then we would just continue building on that for 3 weeks. And then we'd go to the next elementary school. So we really tried not just to promote Washinkan, but also to promote the idea of kendo, right? Give everybody this familiarity with what Budo and what kendo is. Because obviously everybody knows judo, but kendo is still a little bit smaller in the Netherlands. And I think the combination of, like all these different things, like paid advertisements and us physically flyering out in the city and teaching at elementary schools really helped to, put Washinkan on the map and grow as a club as well. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So I think that's a good lesson for anyone listening. Yeah, that's make sure I suppose your social media presence is very good. And yeah, I think that's a great idea. I've not heard that before of going into elementary schools in, obviously they're in a lot of elementary schools in Japan. So kids are going to naturally be exposed to it at a much younger age than they are in Europe, I suppose. So how long were you back in the Netherlands before you went to the US, right? That was your next journey? Well,
US was part of my third education. So after I came back from Budai, I started my club. And then eventually I enrolled into a new university because obviously design was a cool college to graduate from, but it didn't feel to me like I, could find like a decent job in that field. And then I came back from Budai, and kendo is not, like something where you can make your money off, like full time. Although that would probably be very cool. But especially outside of Japan, it's just not possible unless you do something like Taro Ariga and you make like what's it called? Like a Budo Bogu shop where you can sell stuff, right? But from actually doing kendo, it's kind of hard. So I decided to go into a university that's called International Game Architecture and Design. And it's basically a 4-year course of how to make AAA games. And part of that education was me going to Los Angeles and study there or work there as part of the study kind of program to basically get myself introduced into the industry. And obviously I was looking for like some kendo clubs there as well.
So you're doing kendo in LA, right? Is that in Los Angeles? How did you find that then after spending all that time in the Netherlands?
Well, initially I messaged Taro Ariga because I met him during the European Championships in Macedonia because he was there obviously selling stuff for Able Group. So we met there, we talked a little bit, and then when did I go to LA? I think 2018, late 2018 probably. So I messaged him and I said like, hey, I'm coming to LA. Do you know, like, is it possible to practice at your dojo, or do you know any dojo where, like where they have like a good level where I can still improve? And then he said, well, I'm in Irvine, which is kind of far south. So he didn't think it was possible for me to come there every week to practice. So he kind of introduced me to a dojo called West LA Kendo. And he sent them a message saying like, hey, I've got this Dutch guy. Here's his number. And that's how we got in touch. I messaged them, or they messaged me. We had like a little bit of contact, and I just went to their club. Yeah.
So how long were you there for? It was just 1 year?
No, it was less. It was, I think, 6 or 7 months ish. Yeah. but obviously, like I immediately started doing kendo there. Yeah. Yeah, it was a rather short time, but it was very enjoyable because again, it was such a new culture for me from, like the cold, rainy, snowy Netherlands where the sun doesn't often shine to, like my experiences in Japan where everybody is super polite and respectful and very silent and everything is about, like at least in my surroundings was about kendo. And then I went to LA and I was at like Muscle Beach and Santa Monica and it was just such a, American experience. That was very interesting, but it was very nice to see that the kendo community is pretty much the same everywhere, right? It doesn't matter if I'm in Ukraine or if I'm in Poland or in Spain or in Japan or in the US. Everybody has the same mindset. It's very, very friendly and open. So yeah, I felt very welcome in LA, and it still feels a little bit like a second home because I was just, so welcomed by everybody. Yeah.
So you then obviously just a few months in LA and then back to the Netherlands. And then how long were you there until you're now based in Japan? So how long did you move here?
So when I was in LA, I got the request from Sony to see if like I could also do a program with them for like half a year. The idea was that I would fly from LA, but there were some issues with what's it called? Certificate of eligibility that the Japanese government has to issue.
Right.
So I flew back to the Netherlands. I think I stayed there for a month, maybe. And then the certificate came in. I got my visa. I went to Japan. I went there for like a little bit over half a year, a little bit longer, I think. And during that period, they offered me a full-time job. So I was like, okay, I'll just go back to the Netherlands, pick up my stuff. I'll fly back to Japan and I'll start working there. So I flew back to the Netherlands. Corona happened. I was stuck for almost a year in the Netherlands without a job, without a home, without, a whole lot of stuff. And then finally the borders opened up last year. And ever since I'm in Japan and it's Christmas now. So I decided to fly back home. Maybe not the smartest choice because I've seen the news and we'll see if I can get back to Japan.
Well, I think just for people that are going to watch this on YouTube, today is December the 7th, 2021, when we're videoing this. And I think the day you left to go back or the day after, that's when they closed the borders again because of the new Omicron variant of Corona. But I think you will be all right because you left before that change was made. So I think if you try and leave after, I think that's a bit more of a problem. But I have
the advantage that I have a 5-year visa and that my re-entry permit has been, approved. So it should be fine, but we'll never know what's going to change because I'm going to fly back in about a month. So somewhere in halfway in January, and we just don't know what's going to happen in the future. Right? Mm-hmm. So maybe there's no problems. Maybe I'll have to stay in a quarantine hotel for a few days or who knows? Fingers crossed.
So you came to Japan at a bit of a tricky time, really, because there's not that many practices, or there are, but they're not maybe going at full swing at the moment.
So Tokyo and Osaka and maybe some other, big cities that were struck by Corona because, it's just a big population. Everybody's living pretty close to each other. I think those had special issues or like statements issued. We had obviously the state of emergency. And for Tokyo, or at least my areas where, it would be possible for me to practice if there was practice, most of the dojo, either they fully closed, so there was no practice at all, or they would only allow practice for current members and not take in any new members. Right. So I've been to kendo practice and I asked if I could join their club, and they said I'm sorry, we're not allowed to do this right now. So it took me, I think, 4 or 5 months, if not longer, just completely without kendo in Japan, which felt very awkward because I knew there were so many kendo clubs. And then eventually it was a little bit relaxed, and I got into a club. but the practice sessions were still very limited. It was 40 minutes of kendo practice, including the warming up. So we had like 10 minutes of warming up, then 20 minutes of mawari geko, and then like the last 10, 15 minutes would be jigeko with the sensei. So yeah, it wasn't a whole lot, and I'm very happy that this also goes for universities and schools, and pretty much everything was closed. But yeah, those rules are even more relaxed right now. So I actually have the opportunity to practice a little bit more, and I also had the opportunity to practice at different universities. So going to different parts of Tokyo, like Shinjuku or Tsukuba or Koto. It's like a little bit more relaxed, so to speak. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think hopefully if this Omicron variant doesn't get too embedded and things don't really go crazy with that, then I think hopefully the situation with moving around to different practices is going to get a bit easier in the new year. But I think we're just going to have to wait and see at the moment.
Yeah, I'm curious when I can visit Kawasaki.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to have the next KendoWorld Keikokai in July next year. We haven't been able to do it this year, and we weren't able to do it last year for obvious reasons. But hopefully that will be up on that'll be up and running again next year. At which case you won't have to work at it; you'll just be there this time just to take part. Of course, you could work at it if you wanted to.
Yeah, I don't mind helping out. Yeah,
grateful for the help. But yeah, once you're back, then we'll get you down to Kawasaki as well, and another good sports center I go to in Machida is very good. So we've been talking for a little bit over an hour now. So it's getting up towards my bedtime. It's just gone 11 o'clock here in Japan. So it's been a really fascinating talk with you, Ivo, about your experiences, particularly at Budai, and it sounds like it was a really formative experience for your kendo career, and hopefully that's going to keep paying dividends for years and years to come. And I'm guessing that many of the people listening to this today, and myself included, are pretty jealous of the experience that you had there. So okay, well, let's tie this up then. So, Ivo, thank you very much for spending an afternoon where you are with us today.
Yeah.
And it's been a really fascinating talk. So, Ivo, thank you very much.
Same. Thank you very much for having me, and take care. I hope to see you soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.